Hi everyone, I'm Giulia. I'm a biomedical engineer and a PhD student at the University of Glasgow. As a PhD student, I'm doing research, and in my field that means that I'm trying to find innovative ways to solve a big challenge. In the UK, a PhD usually lasts between 3 to 4 years, and that is the time you are given to find your best solution to the problem. In my specific case, I'm trying to find a solution to make diagnostic devices accurate to diagnose infectious diseases, such as, for example, bacterial infections or tuberculosis, also possible in remote areas. And this is important because if we wanted to actually eliminate infectious diseases that are still widespread around the world, we have to be able to test everyone, also in those remote areas that are probably more difficult to reach. And this is because in those areas, for example, there is no access to electricity, for example, or sterile environments, but also people do not have necessarily access to healthcare facilities nearby. And all these are actual fundamental aspects to make diagnosis accurate. So I have been in my PhD already for 2.5 years, and my work is experimental. So that means that I spend a lot of time in a laboratory wearing a lab coat because I'm working with biological material and chemicals. And in order to protect myself for example, pathogenic material like bacteria, I need to work in a fume hood and sterile environments. This occupies usually 2/3 of my time, and the rest of the time I spend it in my office, either reading or analyzing my data. The work environment I'm in, it's really varied. I really like it because we are a group of people working on similar projects, but trying to find slightly different solutions to this project. So we're trying to solve slightly different problems as well. And we all work for the same supervisor. So this means that there is a constant exchange of ideas, suggestions, and so it's very dynamic. So to start and explain better what I actually did in the first 2.5 years of my PhD, when I started, I read a lot of scientific papers and journals to identify very well the problem I wanted to solve. And after I started reading how the rest of the scientific community around the world has tried to solve similar problems to the one I wanted. And in the meantime, of course, I was receiving training in my laboratory and from my group members to understand how to use the machines we had in the lab and the procedure they usually use to solve, as I said, similar problems or in their other projects. And this is super important because reading what other researchers have done actually help you to create a network, because everywhere in the world they are, you can always reach them out and ask suggestions, but at the same time you also get trained on the equipment that your lab has, so you can understand how you can actually put in practice inside your laboratories what other people have done around the world. And after you have read a lot and you have become familiar with the equipment in your laboratory setting, what you usually do as a PhD is to find new ideas to solve the problem. And this is where actually the difficult part and the challenging part arrives. And you have to be very creative, because once you have an idea, you have to understand how to make it valid and real. And this sometimes is not really easy, because if something seems to work very well in theory, when you actually apply it in the reality, it might not be very easy. So there is a lot of troubleshooting work that you have to go through. So for example, when I started my PhD, I started working with this device. This is a device that my group has developed, and it's known as origami diagnostic because the paper is actually folded to perform the diagnosis of infectious diseases. A similar thing to this was used to detect malaria. And so starting from that, I also observed what was working best and what were the challenges around it. And so from this device that I've just shown you, I started trying to make it better. And that's when you have to try to find the best materials to do it, the best experiments, actually, as I said. What I do really love about my job and being a PhD student is that it's extremely flexible time-wise. So if you are a morning person, for example, you can start working early in the morning and finish early in the afternoon. Likewise, if you're not a morning person, you can start any time of the day. As long as you achieve your objectives, it doesn't really matter when you're working. And other things I love about my PhD experience is that I have a lot of opportunities to share my research with people who are not experts in the field. So creating experiments for younger children, play with them, explaining what I'm actually doing, but also like explaining it to adults who maybe have studied something completely different. And the last thing I love is that you can share your research with other experts instead in the field. And this actually gives you the opportunity to travel around the world, because you can go to conferences and they are literally everywhere. And also in my specific case, there is field work. So once I have developed my device, I have to test it in field. And so also that gives me the possibility to travel in places of the world that probably I would have not visited otherwise.